You're tuned in to Iconic Sonics.
Welcome back in to Iconic Sonics. We're presented by Warrior Injury Law and Epic Seats. My name is Danny Ball. I'll be your host, and we have a legendary guest with us today. The one and only Kevin Calabro, the voice of the Supersonics, is here. He told us some stories about how he came up with those unforgettable nicknames that we all grew to love, from the Rain Man to Big Paper Daddy to the Fiddler. He talked about some of the iconic moments in Seattle sports histories and the calls that he's loved. He talked about his mentors on the mic and how he continues to sharpen his craft of play-by-play year in and year out. And he also talked about the future of what NBA basketball might look like here in the Pacific Northwest. I don't want to take up any more of your time, so let's get right into that interview with Kevin. On the court, former Sonics like Gary Payton always showed us what it means to fight with heart. Off the court, when life knocks you down, you need a warrior in your corner. This episode of Iconic Sonics is brought to you by attorney Rob Iddens of Warrior Injury Law. Rob is a Marine Corps vet and the owner of Warrior Injury Law. He's battle-tested and ready to fight for you. Warrior Injury Law serves all of Washington State, so call 253-WARRIOR or visit warriorinjurylaw.com for more information. As always, Iconic Sonics is proud to team up with our partner, Epic Seats, your trusted spot to buy and sell tickets for the best in sports and entertainment. Since we're talking to Kevin Calabro, play-by-play for the Portland Trail Blazers, Epic Seats and us will be doing a 2-ticket giveaway to the Blazers and Suns game down in Portland on November 18th. If you want in, head over to our Instagram at iconic_sonics or Epic Seats Instagram and check out the details. And don't forget that NHL season is also right around the corner. The Seattle Kraken will be back on the ice, and that means it's time to hit epicseats.com for all your NHL action needs. Plus, we'll be rolling out some epic Kraken giveaways all season long. Epic Seats, where fans score big. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to try and take a page out of our guest's playbook for this week's intro, so here goes nothing. He got his start on WBG before they added a line for the 3. He followed it up by becoming the booming voice of the Butler Bulldogs basketball team. He's the former stupendous Supersonic sportscaster and now the tremendously talented play-by-play telecaster for the Trailblazers of Portland, the godfather to Miss Molly, the farmer to the chickens in the barnyard, and the conductor of magic carpet rides everywhere, the one and only Kevin Calabro. Kevin, how are you?
Danny, I'm great. After that wonderful introduction, I feel even better.
It is a pleasure to have the voice of the Sonics with us, and I'd like to start off with a few quick hitter questions. I think the best place to start would be asking you about your favorite people to work with during your time as a play-by-play announcer, Kevin.
Absolutely. I think at the top of the list is just working with so many great analysts, for one thing. Just a long list of really fine people. Wally Walker being one of them, the former general manager of the Sonics. But I knew him as a broadcaster before he became the general manager. But as Wally said, is there a reason you've gone through so many partners? It seemed like they always got better jobs. Of course, Marcus Johnson. Yeah, Marcus Johnson was phenomenal and will always and forevermore be, one of the top guys that I think I've ever worked with. Just a laugh a minute, great personality, big wit, encyclopedic knowledge of the history of the game, and certainly a great X's and O guy as well as somebody that could really articulate, boil it down, and communicate it to the average fan what it was like to be a player in the moment. And he played at a very high level in the NBA. You talk about Bird, you talk about Dr. J, you have to mention Marcus Johnson. They were all contemporaries, all playing that forward position in the NBA for many years, and he played for some great Milwaukee teams coached by Don Nelson. So, I have to put Marcus Johnson up there. And then, on ESPN radio, working with Dr. Jack, Jack Ramsey, one of the most gracious guys you'll ever want to meet. And even at that advanced age, when he was still doing radio, was as sharp as could be, very lucid, big personality, and a funny guy when he was off the air. When he was on the air, he was very much the coach, and he would lower his voice a couple of octaves to impress that on you. And then working on radio and TV with Hubie Brown was always just a delight and a great privilege that I had. It it was more fun, I think, off the air with UB, although we had great times on the air. It was all business with the coach. But off the air, he would get into some great stories and would expand on these stories that just seemingly went on forever. They would go from the cab to the lobby to the elevator up to the floor of your room, and then you would have to either make the decision to jump out on the floor and listen there on the floor of his room, or keep the door open depending on where you thought the story was. So I'd keep the door open, with the button that, it's the arrows that go the opposite direction to listen to the wrap up of UB story. But then you think it's a wrap up. It's not. It's going another direction. So you let up on the button, you jump out on the floor, and you enjoy UB story. So working with UB was just a great delight as well when I was doing all those ESPN games. So yeah, there were any number of guys that I worked, including the great late Slick Watts did some games for us. Jerome Kersey did a couple of games when he was playing for the Sonics at the tail end of his career. Terry Cummings, I think, stepped in and did a game one time for us. So, we would pull them literally off the bench and would put them in that role as analysts, and we just had a great time.
That leads me perfectly into this question then. Who are some of your favorite play-by-play and announcers to listen while you were growing up and that you kind of looked up to?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my dad was from Western Pennsylvania, a town called Washington, right on the West Virginia border. It was, a mining town. They had a couple of steel mills there, Jessup Steel Mill. So it was very much a blue-collar town. And they were into the Pittsburgh Pirates, and they were into Roberto Clemente. And doing the broadcast on KDKA radio was Bob Prince. And Bob Prince was a big character. He had a big, deep, gravelly voice, kind of had that southern drawl, and he would tell kind of slightly off-color stories on the air. And he called Roberto Bobby. It was always Bobby Clemente. And there were some really good Pirate teams at that time. And I just remember, my uncles and my grandfather sitting out on the porch of my grandfather's place. They'd have the radio on, of course, KDKA, Pittsburgh, listening to Bob Prince, play-by-play of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And right next to my granddad's house was an old warehouse made of cinder block and a tin roof. And I loved to play baseball. And so while they were listening to the game, I was listening to Bob Prince. I would throw balls up on the top of the roof. They would disappear on the top of the roof, and then you could hear them coming off the tin roof, and I'd make the catch there, and then I'd work on the ground balls. I'd throw them off the cinder blocks, and they'd come back, and I'd short hop and do that kind of thing. And so that was kind of our thing there in Pittsburgh. But growing up in Indianapolis, I could hear KMOX and the great Jack Buck, listen to Harry Carey wherever he might be, either in St. Louis and then later to Chicago with the Chicago White Sox initially, and then obviously the Chicago Cubs. Jack Brickhouse of the Chicago Cubs. I loved listening to Wolfman Jack, and I could get Wolfman Jack on the X station, which was out of San Diego. They used to broadcast like 1,000,000 watts. It was 1,000,000 watts because their transmitter was in Mexico, and so you could hear Wolfman Jack all the way up into Indiana. But that was the beauty. I loved radio. And would just dial across and listen to various play-by-play guys all over the country. So, but those were kind of the big three for me, and they were all baseball guys. And then our local guy, Jerry Baker, who was the original voice of the Indiana Pacers when they started with the ABA in '67, to this day is one of the finest voices that I've ever heard. And I listened a lot to Jerry Baker and still consider him to be a mentor, I call him about every 6 months just to run some stuff by him. Just a wonderful font of information. So those would be my Mount Rushmore.
That's great. That's great. One last one kind of in this quick hitter section. What's one of your favorite Seattle sports calls that wasn't one of your own?
Just about anything that Niehaus did. Niehaus was a fabulous voice, first and foremost, terrific wit. He was the guy that really didn't need to give the score. You knew where the Mariners were in terms of their positioning in the game, early, late, whatever it might be. If they were ahead, if they were behind, you could tell in his voice, how they were playing. He didn't trash the players. He didn't second guess the coaches and the strategy. He wasn't a great analytics guy because analytics wasn't part of the broadcast, any broadcast at that time. But boy, you knew balls and strikes, outs. You knew the runs. You knew the score of the game. You knew who was playing well, who wasn't playing well, just by the tone of his voice. So, to me, it was just any knee-house home run call was always a good call. Particularly if it was a grand slam.
Of course, get out the rye bread and mustard, Grandma. I love that.
That's right.
Actually, I lied. One more in this quick hitter section. Known for your unbelievable nicknames, famously Sean Kemp, the Rain Man. Do you have any personal favorites? I'll share mine after you answer, but your favorite nicknames that you came up with for Sonics players during your time here in Seattle?
Well, the thing was, I never created one for any player. It was always an offshoot of either what his teammates were calling him, maybe something that was said in a practice. In the case of the Rain Man, you'd have to ask the Kostakos brothers about that, because the Kostakos brothers were creating these incredible sports posters back in the early 90s when Sean came on the scene. And this was before the big marketing scene in the NBA, obviously, when there was just very little merchandise that was sold at maybe one kiosk, right, in the building. That was it. They didn't have the merchandise shop. They didn't have the team shops, any of that stuff. It's great that they do now, but they just didn't have merch at the time, right? And so I just happened to see one of their posters, and it was that iconic Rain Man poster with Sean in the air alongside the Space Needle. And I don't know, it just occurred to me, like, well, why is no one, this is the perfect nickname for him. REIGN, the Rain Man. Are you kidding me? So the time came when they were playing the Golden State Warriors in an early playoff game. This was George Karl's first year with the team, and we were experiencing this resurgence of the team, the realization that we had a good young core of basketball players led by Gary Payton, Sean Kemp, and some really great veterans on that team as well. And that lob pass ahead from Payton to Kemp and the dunk, and I'm just losing it. The crowd is losing it. The place is just going nuts. And it was, the Rain Man has struck. And, it's pre-internet, and we're getting cards and letters now on the call, with the Rain Man. Where did this come from? The Rain Man, we love that. And, and the nickname's only good if the player likes it. And I think Sean did like that. I think when he understood what rain meant.
Right.
And was raining down dunks on everybody, so Sean liked that. Gary Payton, of course, gave himself his own nickname, the Glove. I think his cousin actually gave him that nickname, the Glove, because he sticks to people defensively. He was terrific. Hersey Hawkins, obviously, the Hawk. That was an easy one. Big Smooth, the nickname for Big Smooth, he acquired when he was in Los Angeles with the Lakers. And it was one of the great trades of all time for the Sonics. They traded Benoit Benjamin and the draft rights to Doug Christie to the Los Angeles Lakers for Sam Perkins. In fact, Chick Hearn, the longtime great iconic voice, I forgot to mention him on my Mount Rushmore. Chick Hearn's on my Mount Rushmore, great play-by-play announcer, great character. He for many years, he said it was the worst trade that the Lakers ever made, was moving Sam Perkins along to Seattle for that package. But nonetheless, Sam came with the nickname Big Smooth. Pick that up. Ricky Pierce, Big Paper Daddy. Now that was acquired when George Karl, before practice, occasionally would give the guys an opportunity. One time through, anybody hits a half-court shot, we cancel practice. You go do your treatment, do your running, whatever you need to do, but no formal practice. And boy, the guys are all for that. Well, Ricky Pierce steps up and he just nails the shot from half court. And players are ecstatic. And as Dana Barros is running off the floor, I catch his eye and he's just shaking. He said, Big Paper Daddy, Big Paper Daddy. And I thought, okay, Big Paper Daddy. So he was also known as Deuce. But Pierce got the nickname Big Paper Daddy. And believe me, if Ricky didn't like that nickname, he'd let me know immediately. So those were just Vincent Askew. When I found out that he played violin, which just is so incongruous with Vincent Askew's persona on the floor, because he was, I don't want to say he was a thug, but this dude was a hard pipe dude. And he would get into folks. I'll tell you what, Sean Elliott still has nightmares when you mention the name Vincent Askew, because Vincent would just shut him down. But I found out that Vince played violin when he was going to school in Memphis. And I thought, man, this would be a perfect nickname for us. So I gave him the nickname the Fiddler.
I love that one too. Big Paper Daddy was my personal favorite. That once I heard that one, and so thank you for the backstory. That's great. Um,
Dana Barros.
because of all of those nicknames and all the calls, there's a great clip that we posted on the Iconic Sonics page of you doing. Unfortunately, it's in the '94 playoffs, which we all know how that one ended. But you're just going absolutely crazy with a great play-by-play, and it ends up with a corner three-pointer. And you would have thought that this is the middle of the fourth quarter, and then you let us know the time and score, and it's 11-6. And it's just one of the great things about you is that you brought the energy right from the jump. And so I'm trying to do that here in the interview, just to make sure that I'm doing an honor to you.
Well, I remember that. I remember that play though, Danny, because as you see the clip, there were a number of, I think, 3 offensive rebounds. The Sonics just swarmed the glass. They just kept coming up with the rock and moving the ball, and then finally the open shooter. Yeah, it was a great play.
Well, because of that energy that you bring and the nicknames and just the sound of your voice, a lot of people put you in the GOAT conversation. A lot of people also put LeBron James in the GOAT conversation. And there's something that the both of you have in common. You've both worked in the NBA for more than half your life. You're entering your 38th year, I believe, with the Trailblazers this year. And I guess my question here is, when did you know that this was your calling and that this is what you were going to do?
Well, I mean, it goes back to following the ABA because as much as I love the players, Freddie Lewis, Bob Nedelecki, the great Roger Brown, also known as the Raja, Mel Daniels. I mean, those were my guys in the ABA. They were great players. They really were. They were great players. And but we loved listening to Jerry Baker. That was kind of the thing is, Mom and Dad would take us to the Coliseum twice a year to see Pacer basketball. But we were watching on the local television station, WTTV Channel 4, or we were listening on radio to Jerry do the broadcasts. And he became as much or more part of the family because when you think about it, the radio, if you give a guy a chance at being the voice, he will outlive everybody. General manager, coaches, players, a lot of times the ownership. He's the one constant, or she could be the one constant thread through, the life and legacy of a team. He's the storyteller. They are the storyteller. So I think it was listening to the Pacer games where I just decided, man, if I ever got a chance to do that, it'd be the greatest thing ever. And so, I've heard the Albert brothers tell this story, and I'm good friends with Steve, and I knew Marv, and I know Al, and they all tell the story when they were kids. They're running around the house there in New York City, and they're doing play-by-play. So we doing the same thing. We're out, we're going up in the state of Indiana. We're shooting hoops, doing our own little play-by-play, that kind of thing. But we had a high school radio station, and I was a better baseball player than I was basketball player. And I just decided, rather than just bang my head against the wall, trying to be the 12th or 13th man on the roster and never playing, I want to do some play-by-play. I'd really love to get into radio. And so we had a radio station there, and I took full advantage of that. And my sophomore year, I'm doing JV games on the high school radio station, 450 watt FM station, WBDG. My mom could hear it, and we literally grew up less than 2 miles away from the high school. She could hear the broadcast on a windy day, one of those kinds of things, very small transmitter. So that's kind of where I got my start. And I'd do games, and people said, people would make comments, hey, you got kind of a knack there. And, my voice deepened, and I was blessed with a very good voice. My dad was a terrific public speaker because he was a grade school principal, so they called upon him to do a lot of public speaking and so forth. And he was a radio man in the Pacific during World War II. So while he did Morse code, he would describe what he did on this small LST ship in the Armada, so to speak, there in the Pacific. And it captivated me, just that idea of waves going through the air and communication and so forth. So that's really how I got my start, and where that idea germinated of, this would be really something that you could pursue. So I did 3 years of basketball there at Ben Davis, did some football on radio on the high school station, then went to Butler University. They had a great radio TV program at the time. And they would let freshmen on the air. And so I took advantage of that. And they played a very competitive schedule. They were playing the Marquette Warriors with Al McGuire as the coach, national champions in '77, I think it was, and playing the Michigans and going to the Winston Tire Classic at USC and all these, and playing big schools. So it was a big time D1 program. So by the time I got out of Butler, I'd had 4 years of really good play-by-play. Worked for a local station there that was the flagship station of the Pacers, WIBC. And I was exposed to some really great voices. Jerry Baker was working there. Bob Lamey, the longtime voice of the Indianapolis Colts. You've heard his calls a number of times, I'm sure. And Joe McConnell, who was another terrific voice, who did the Minnesota Vikings, Chicago Bears, White Sox, any number of teams, the Phoenix Suns at one point, and did the Indiana Pacers. So I was on staff there. I was an overnight disc jockey. I did minor league hockey for a year and loved it. I did Purdue basketball and then got the opportunity to do the Kansas City Kings. So I got the Kings job when I was, I think, 25, 26 years old. And that was my first exposure to the NBA. So, and I told myself that year, if I get just a chance to do one NBA game, I'll be a happy man. I will have felt like I reached the top, the pinnacle. But then to do that 1 year with the Kings was fabulous because we were doing a simulcast. The coach was the venerable Cotton Fitzsimmons. We had a terrific basketball team, a 39-win team that made the playoffs and then were destroyed by the eventual world champion Lakers that year. Our first game was at home at Kemper Arena. We're playing the Lakers. And that's when Chick Hearn made it a point to come down and introduce himself to me. I was so intimidated by him. I think he probably knew that. But he wanted to meet the new guy that's doing the Kansas City Kings. So he came down and introduced himself. And he said, after introducing himself, he says, now, if you need anything about our team, let me know. Let me know. And now tell me about your team. And I was so impressed with this guy. So I became just a lifelong fan of Chick Hearn. But that was a great introduction, I think, to the NBA, Chick Hearn.
Well, I'm a firm believer that luck is preparation meets opportunity. And so yesterday I was preparing for this interview. I was doing some research on you of stuff that I already knew and some stuff I didn't know. And last night, I've got to do a little sidebar here. Last night I went to a friend's going away party. We played some trivia over at a bar in Queen Anne. And we did all right in trivia. We had a good time, which is more important. And we were all saying our goodbyes to Ian. And Ian looks at me and he says, "Hey, Danny, you should get this guy's number. He plays pickup basketball all the time." And so I give him my phone and he's putting in his contact into my phone. And he hands the phone back, and I'll be damned if the phone doesn't say Joey Calabro on it. And I go, "You're not related to Kevin, are you?" And I go, "You're not related to Kevin, are you?" He goes, "Yeah, I am." I go, "Well, I'm interviewing him tomorrow at 2:30. And so we had a heck of a small world moment last night over in Queen Anne that I've been sitting on my hands for these first 20 minutes waiting to tell you about.
Well, that's crazy. Yeah, Joey, a late bloomer, my son, who played a terrific brand of basketball, rat ball, at Western Washington, and continues to play and can still dunk. He'll turn 30 this fall. So if you need a guy who can put it on the deck, shoot a little bit, and still can throw one, you want Joey on your team.
Totally. We'll run some high pick and roll in the near future once his broken finger heals up, for sure. But that was just about as good as Seattle can get because right, we're a big enough city to have some major sports teams, but a small enough city to where I can bump into Joey Calabro the day before I interview his father. So that was awesome. And now for a quick commercial break. On the court, former Sonics like Gary Payton always showed us what it means to fight with heart. Off the court, when life knocks you down, you need a warrior in your corner. This episode of Iconic Sonics is brought to you by attorney Rob Iddens of Warrior Injury Law. Rob is a Marine Corps vet and the owner of Warrior Injury Law. He's battle-tested and ready to fight for you. Warrior Injury Law serves all of Washington State, so call 253-WARRIOR or visit warriorinjurylaw.com for more information. As always, Iconic Sonics is proud to team up with our partner, Epic Seats, your trusted spot to buy and sell tickets for the best in sports and entertainment. Since we're talking to Kevin Calabro, play-by-play for the Portland Trail Blazers, Epic Seats and us will be doing a 2-ticket giveaway to the Blazers and Suns game down in Portland on November 18th. If you want in, head over to our Instagram at @iconic_sonics or Epic Seats Instagram and check out the details. And don't forget that NHL season is also right around the corner. The Seattle Kraken will be back on the ice, and that means it's time to hit epicseats.com for all your NHL action needs. Plus, we'll be rolling out some epic Kraken giveaways all season long. Epic Seats, where fans score big. And now, let's get back to the show. I've recently rewatched some old Sonics games, and it's funny just to see the 20-foot pull-up jumpers and deep two-point shots that we just don't really see in the NBA today. What are your kind of thoughts at where the game is going and where it is as you enter now your 38th year with the Trailblazers?
Yeah, well, obviously the three-point shot was there. It's in the rule books. One of the first guys that I worked with the Sonics, one of those going back now, one of the analysts that we had on our broadcast is my third year with the club. They decided to simulcast the game and make me the lead announcer, and they brought in Rick Barry to do the color analyst. So, here's Hall of Fame Rick Barry, and I learned so much from Rick. But the one thing that he constantly talked about during the broadcast, he said, it's simple math. 50% from three-point range, 33% from three. If you can shoot north of 33, 34, 35%, take that shot, because you're not going to shoot 50% from two, just unless you're camped out in the paint, which was the game, right? Game was dump it to the block, see what you can find down there. I think that's where George Karl should be given credit, and I know Curry obviously ushered us into the volume shooting from three, but George was brilliant in surveying his players and their strengths and their weaknesses, and accentuating their strengths and bolstering the players' confidence and getting them to overcome their weaknesses. And I'll use Nate McMillan as an example. When George took over, Nate, was a damaged shooter, but he was a 6'5" point guard who could really defend. He was one of the better defenders on Magic Johnson. Magic said so much. And, Nate was a terrific assist man. He wasn't flashy, but he made the simple pass. But George realized in order for him to be a complete player, and with all these great talents that Nate had, he needed to improve his shooting. So he insisted that Nate step out and take some deeper shots and take some threes. Same thing with Sam Perkins. I think it was because of George's experience over in Spain that where they were inverting bigs, and bigs were shooting up from the perimeter, not necessarily three, but were opening things up. He wanted Sam to step out, and he wanted Sam to shoot some threes. So he had Sam out there. He had Detlef Schrempf shooting threes. He had a great shooter by the name of Eddie Johnson, you probably remember. Eddie was one of the top scorers in the NBA. I think Eddie's in the top 25 scoring in the NBA. But a terrific three-point shooter. Dana Barrow's another guy that could shoot from three. They had those talents. The Sonics did use those opportunities, but they just didn't shoot them on volume like they are now. And I think it's Curry that obviously gets credit for shooting on volume, and his coaches for seeing, realizing, and rolling with it and giving him the green light. So very definitely Steph Curry, was a guy that opened it up, I think, to the possibilities.
As you mentioned earlier, you did broadcast some games for the Indianapolis Checkers of the Central Hockey League. I bring this up because the Trailblazers' new owner also owns the Carolina Hurricanes in the NHL. I'd love to just kind of get your initial thoughts and kind of take this into a little bit of a Trailblazers conversation, even though this is Iconic Sonics. Just kind of your initial thoughts of Tom Dundon coming in and buying the team and the feelings down there in Portland.
Well, he's got exclusive rights to do the deal. The deal won't be consummated for some time. That's subject, obviously, to the vetting of the NBA and then the final vote from the owners. But, from everything I've heard, he brings a real tenacity and real focus in all aspects of the organization to the ice, obviously to the Hurricanes in Raleigh. And so I suspect he'll do the same thing with the Blazers. The Blazers caught fire in the last half of the season last year. They made some terrific acquisitions, Denny Advia being number one. Denny was our finest player last year. And I think he can really build on those talents without question. He's just a tenacious player who consistently comes at people. He's a very physical player. He loves to play physical basketball. I love that. He's got the ability to shoot the three, the mid-range. He plays with force at the rim. He's one of these guys that can rip a rebound and handle it and push it up the floor. The Blazers quicken the pace is something that Chauncey has wanted to do for the last several years, and now he's got, I think, the personnel to do it. Rip it and run and get it down the floor. A lot like the Sonics used to do a great deal, because you can do that if defensively you're shutting people down. And the Blazers really, I thought, found their stride last year on the defensive end of the floor, primarily because they've got a guy by the name of Toumani Camara who just defends beautifully. I mean, the guy's 6'8". He's a wing, but he can play smalls. He can play defensively, can match up on points, twos, threes, fours, whatever it might be. He just has got this blue-collar attitude about playing defense. So with those kinds of components, those two players playing as well as they have, those young players, the addition of Shaedon Sharpe obviously coming into his fourth year, a guy who, again, another guy that plays with force at the rim, a tremendous leaper, great finisher, still needs to get a more consistent three-point shot and work on his approach to the rim off the bounce. Defensively, he was called out by Chauncey through the year last year, lost his starting job and was put to the bench. And when he came back, I think the message was clear that, it's defense first with this team. So with those types of players, adding a guy like Drew Holiday, who's got a championship ring and all that seasoning that he has, with the addition of Damian Lillard, who's rehabbing from the Achilles injury, as he will be next year, but very much is going to be a factor in terms of his presence. I think it's going to be just a really fun year to follow the Blazers. There are a lot of storylines going on with that team this year.
I loved what Dame said about being the best assistant coach in the league, and obviously there was a joyous return to him coming back to Portland, which felt like an interesting way to get to a happy ending, but a happy ending nonetheless. Unfortunately, on less of a fun topic, there was, as I kind of mentioned to Jason Quick a few weeks ago, there were some things that were said by Adam Silver down in Las Vegas in July that sounded a lot like the beginning of what ended up being the end here in Seattle, about the Moda Center needing to be redone, which then is followed up by kind of talks of if the Blazers might leave town. And Joey and I last night even got talking about it, and he said he had a guy at a deli bring it up to him. What are your kind of thoughts on the possible relocation versus maybe the expansion talks that have been talked about, and just kind of how those are different, how those two moves versus moving a team as opposed to adding teams, where do those kind of land in your mind, and kind of how do you think about them?
Well, at first I would say I don't think the Blazers are in any danger of relocating or being moved. Now, all indications is that the prospective owner will want to keep them in Portland, but the building will need some either refurbishment, or I'm sure they will explore ideas in terms of a rebuild of Moda, maybe a relocation next door to Memorial, and then coming back to Moda after it's redone. I'm not sure the logistics of that, but all of these are at play, and all of them will be discussed once new ownership lands in 6 months, 7 months, whatever it's going to be. I presume in the spring. That's what's been reported. I think Jason reported that in early March is when he's reporting that ownership would take control. These buildings are expensive propositions. In order to make them work, you need a commitment and a partnership with the city, the state, with the public, with the taxpayers, and that's always a difficult proposition. And I think that the issue that we ran into Seattle was one of building fatigue, and that was a term that Clay Bennett actually came up with. There weren't a lot of things that I agreed with Clay, but I think he was right in that regard. You had just done a referendum for Mr. Allen to get the Seahawks done, and he was obviously contributing a great deal to that. Legislature, had to go to the 12th hour literally to get the building done for the Mariners, and you see what great facilities both of those are. I just didn't think there was any political will to to do it back when the Sonics were talking about it. So hopefully there will be political will in Portland and in Oregon, because I think it's, the thing about the Blazers is it's, their only professional team other than with all due respect to the soccer, but it was the first professional team down there. It has a world championship. And I think it's recognized as Oregon's team. It's branded as Oregon's team, not just Portland's team, but Oregon's team. So you'd like to see the state come together and pull together and come up with a plan and to keep the Blazers there in the region. And I think, ironically, it's because the league took such a black eye on Seattle. To this day, they're hearing about it. And to a lesser degree, Vancouver to Memphis. Vancouver is just a great market for a short period of time. It was just unfortunate that it was so poorly handled there and managed, unfortunately, in Vancouver. I think it's because of those two instances that the league is very hesitant to talk about relocating a team. Having said that, there are other markets, small markets. There are other teams that have leases that are up in as early as 29. That if you're a realist, you have to think about this a little bit. If the league is not going to expand immediately, and if the expansion number is $5 to $6 billion, I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility, because in the NBA anything can happen, that one of those teams in smaller markets that has a short-term lease that maybe has an older building that's a little dog-eared may look to other markets. And Seattle certainly would be a great market. Now, I know people in Seattle. A lot of people don't have the appetite for that process, given what happened to them back in 2008, and I would understand that. But nonetheless, that's a real possibility, I think. I think it just came down to the owners. They just didn't want to share 1/32 of this gazillion-dollar new television package. They just didn't want to give up those dollars, and they just didn't think the compensation at $5 to $6 billion, which would have probably netted them anywhere from, $375 million to $400 million a pop, just didn't think it was going to be in line with the kinds of dollars that they would lose and the way they would dilute, if you will, the television product. So I think for that reason, they decided to just, I don't want to say table it, but move it to the two existing committees that they have now for further investigation. I think they know, though, at this point, what Seattle can bring to the table. 41 years of history, a great legacy, a market that is hungry for NBA basketball, has a state-of-the-art facility in Climate Pledge. I think people realize, where Seattle is, and certainly Vegas would be an opportunity, I think, ripe for the right people too.
Definitely. I was even going through and just looking at the attendance numbers of the preseason games that have been up here in Seattle, and those are
Right.
on par with the NBA average of regular season games.
Yeah.
So definitely a ravenous appetite in Seattle. Obviously, I know that firsthand, working so much on this brand and this show on our social media. I think you also hit it on the head that it is really hard, and I think a lot of people almost, in the same way that they talk about people foul baiting and flopping, and they want an ethical return of the Sonics. They don't want to, see that relocation. But I think you nailed it on the head that it is kind of something that we might have to start wrapping our heads around here as these leases expire and as these small markets kind of get their feet held to the flame. What other kind of memories do you have from those final years of the Sonics leaving, PJ Carlesimo coaching, Kevin Durant coming in as a rookie? I know that you made the decision to go to Portland rather than follow the team. What can you share with the audience here about the end of things here in Seattle?
Yeah, my decision actually, Danny, was to stay in Seattle because I had
right.
4
Sorry.
kids.
Yep.
I had 4 kids, including Danny, including Joey. I've just adopted you, including Joey, to think about. I'd had 21 years with the Sonics, and to go back what I said earlier, if I'd just done one NBA game, I'd have been Moonlight Graham. I'd have been happy. I'd gone back into regular civilian life and been happy. But to do 21 years, I thought, well, that's a pretty darn good run. Yeah, I loved Seattle. We loved the lifestyle there. Felt like I had equity in the market. Felt like I could maybe find something else in the market, or wait and survey and see what other NBA opportunities were out there. So I think we made the right decision. I just didn't want to move to Oklahoma City without the family, or move the family to Oklahoma City with the kids being in 4 different schools. So it didn't make any sense. So it's one of those life decisions. You just, you put your big boy pants on and you make a tough decision. And so we decided to wander off into the great unknown. And I tell you what, I had so many great experiences for 8 years of freelancing. It was fabulous. I never dreamed I'd be doing soccer, nor did anybody else for that matter. And there were a lot of people who wished I hadn't done soccer, but I did it for a year, enjoyed it, did a talk show in Seattle. I'll never do that again. Did that for, I think, 3 years. So those are great experiences. Those were kind of out there on the edge, kind of testing the boundaries a little bit, and then realizing, like, man, I this is not something I want to do. But it's great that I did it, and I wouldn't have had an opportunity to do this. Now, I did stumble into some great gigs, though. The Pac-12 network was great to me. They gave me a package of something like 30 college basketball games, every one of them up and down the coast. I was doing college football. Never imagined I'd do college football again. I did some Husky football limited games back in the 90s, but was able to get back into college football for the Pac-12 network. Had a great time working for them, and worked for them for about 6 years. And then I freelanced for ESPN Radio, and then became their lead guy on play-by-play on ESPN Radio, and did 3 finals championships. Never imagined I'd do that ever. That was wonderful, great experience. Got to freelance for TNT, did a year and a half of a limited package of television for ESPN, something else I never imagined I'd be doing. So those were all great experiences for 8 years until I got the Blazer gig and hooked on with the Blazers. So did that answer your question? I think that was
No, it does. It does. I would love hearing about all of your journey and all the different touch points. The Sounders are on a heck of a run right now, and obviously the Husky football season starts this weekend, so all relevant things. I think what that kind of makes me think of is the changing landscape of the current NBA media market. And now we have Amazon Prime that's coming into play. NBC got their rights back with this massive media deal. What are you seeing, and what do you think about kind of where it's gone with streaming and League Pass and all of that stuff, and maybe what's next for Kevin Calabro?
Well, I think the more exposure for the league, the better. I think our consumers now are different in the way they sample our work. I think there are more and more people that aren't watching. They're not sitting down and watching a 2-hour game. They're looking at clips the next day. They're looking at their social media to see what was said about the game. I think I call it the Peyton place. It's people love the off the court stuff with the NBA, and the NBA has been pretty good about that. Our players are very involved in social media, in popular culture, obviously, with dress, with their music, Damian Lillard, with the rapping. And so I think that all of that is good, and we need to put it on as many platforms as possible in order to reach our young audience. But it's rare, and I take that approach when I do play-by-play, when I do a game. People aren't hanging on your every word. They are not with you for the entire 2 hours of the game, ordinarily. The hardcore fans are, so you don't take them for granted. But you have to, I think, continually update people who are joining you on what's going on during the course of the game. So sometimes you may hear a guy or gal doing what I do, the play-by-play, being sometimes redundant, and that is it's because they realize that the audiences are shifting in and out, and they want to keep people abreast of what's going on. So, it's a balance that you try to strike. As for me, I don't care if it's the NBA or it's the Chelan Goats down the street here in Chelan, Washington, the high school team. I want to continue to do the craft, because that's what it is. Good play-by-play is a craft that you continually develop and improve on. And I always feel like I've am trying to get better with the way I approach the game. And as you get older, you realize that less is more. I got that from Jack Buck. I didn't quite understand it when he told me, as a 27-year-old guy that was doing Missouri basketball at the time, less is more. I get it now. Because when you listen to the greats, they distill everything, and they let that crowd noise and the ambiance carry them through the course of a game. And they let their voice do the work, and their tone, like the great Dave Niehaus, convey a message rather than words sometimes. And then if you use precise language, you can also keep things simple and easy to understand on the air. So I just want to continue to work on the craft. That's all. And if, I'm back doing Blazers, or I'm somewhere else in the league, or I'm not in the league, I'll be somewhere doing play-by-play, working on my craft. Yeah.
I love that. Sticking with it, even in year 38, just trying to get better. I could sit here and listen to you all day. I think a lot of people could. Someone in our comment section described it as they were able to turn the TV on and cook in the kitchen, and they were still watching the game because of how good a job you did. And it was a great way to describe your play-by-play style, I think. You're truly one of the greats. It was an honor to have you on here. Any last thing? Yeah, of course. Any last messages for the people out there? Any more wisdom you kind of want to impart as a parting gift for
look,
our listeners?
I know it's been 18 years since we've seen the Sonics around these parts, and I will tell the fans what I've been saying since the year they left, 2008. In another 3 years, we'll have NBA basketball. I said it then, and I'm sticking to it. Give it another 3 years, and we'll have NBA basketball. But it'll be worth waiting for, believe me, because it'll be just a joyous time. And our players from the 90s are still young enough that they'll be around. But when we lose guys like the Wizard Gus Williams, and we lose guys like the great Slick Watts, when those the passing of those players, you realize that the clock's ticking, and you want so bad for somebody like Lenny Wilkins, for somebody like downtown Freddie Brown, the great Jack Sikma. You want so bad for it to happen, and have them there, and have them to as part of this great legacy of Sonics basketball. So hang in there, fans. It'll happen.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and just like your mentor and someone you looked up to, like Chick Hearn, I hope one day we can retire a microphone in your honor up here in Seattle.
That'd be fabulous. I'll be there. I'll show up for that one. I may wear a tie and shave.
I'll hold you to it. Well, and whether we see you at the scorer's table doing the play-by-play, or whether you're just sitting courtside, I'll expect you up here in 3 years when that team is back.
That'll be fabulous, man. Thanks for having me.
That does it for our episode today. A huge shout out to the voice of the Sonics, Kevin Calabro, for stopping by the show and hanging out with us, as well as a shout out to our presenting sponsors, Warrior Injury Law and Epic Seats. Be sure to check us out on Instagram at iconic_Sonics, as we'll be doing some giveaways over there. And we'll see you soon, Sonics fans.